Ukraine is taking the fight to Russia in Africa. Recently, the Ukrainian-Russian war seemingly extended its battleground to the African continent. While Russian presence in Africa is not new and has been steadily growing through the private military company Wagner Group in the past months, Ukrainian forces have been identified confronting this Russian-backed group in Sudan. Reports talk about an intense urban warfare scene between Ukrainian special forces and Wagner Group troops. Ukrainian soldiers have been spotted maneuvering in a dense area in Sudan. There is evidence of an ongoing effort to slowly take out Wagner Group forces months after their leader Yevgeny Prigozhin was presumed dead following a plane crash. That flight was heading to Moscow from the African continent. What in the world is really going on here? Is Ukraine attempting to confront Russia in Africa? What precisely is the Wagner Group's purpose on this continent? Let's find out. The Wagner Group, a Russian military company (PMC), plays a significant role in Russia's foreign policy. Established by businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin, formerly known as Putin's chef, due to his role as a CEO of a catering company which served the Kremlin, the group emerged during Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and has since operated in Syria, Ukraine, and African countries. It operates as a complex network of businesses and mercenary groups closely tied to the Russian military and intelligence community. Despite being illegal under Russian law, the Kremlin employs Wagner to advance its foreign policy goals. The group has expanded globally, engaging in conflicts and controlling mining sites in Africa to access valuable resources. In recent years, Wagner's operations have gained more attention, raising concerns about global security implications. Over the past decade, the Wagner Group has established strong ties with several African governments, including operations in countries such as the Central African Republic (CAR), Libya, Mali, Sudan, and Mozambique. In Sudan, the group has been involved in training, protecting officials, and engaging in mining operations, while in Mozambique, it supported the army in its fight against Islamist insurgents. Also, Wagner's interest in Mali could be linked to its abundant gold reserves, and the group has pursued commercial activities in all the countries where it operates. A key resource which, if sent back to the motherland, would greatly support the current and difficult war efforts. Since Wagner began working in Mali, civilian casualties have increased by more than 270%. A UN report released in May described how Malian soldiers, overseen by Wagner fighters, killed around 500, mostly unarmed civilians, in a village in the Mopti region over 5 days in March 2022. Particularly in Sudan, Wagner has been involved in training as well as the protection of officials and mining sites. The US Treasury says the Wagner Group has conducted paramilitary operations, support for preserving authoritarian regimes, and exploitation of natural resources. In 2018, they had about 100 men actively training Sudanese military forces, and the relationship has grown from there. The operations of the group in Sudan continued even after the April 2009 coup d'etat that ousted al-Bashir from power. They then supported the 2021 military coup, which brought in a government more interested in strengthening ties with Russia. In September, an anonymous source revealed to CNN that a non-Sudanese military was behind a series of drone attacks against the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), a paramilitary force in Sudan, suggesting the involvement of Ukrainian special forces. These attacks began just 2 days after the Wagner Group deployed armed trucks to an RSF garrison at Al-Zaroug, southwest Sudan. As for the Wagner Group, they have firmly maintained a presence in Sudan since 2017, strategically extending their reach across the continent. In April, the late founder Yevgeny Prigozhin audaciously claimed that not a single Wagner PMC fighter had set foot in Sudan for over 2 years. However, mounting evidence has revealed Wagner's complicity in arming the RSF with missiles, further fueling their relentless war against the Sudanese armed forces. Even more, footage from July 2022 appears to vividly capture mercenaries training Sudanese forces in daring parachute landing exercises. The Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, GTOC, assessed in April that Wagner relentlessly sought both influence and material gain in Sudan. It is boldly believed that the primary objective of the Russians in Sudan is not merely to protect Khartoum's political power, but rather to lavishly exploit the country's abundant mineral resources. In fact, Russia has forged trade deals in the past to mine gold in Sudan. In December 2022, civilian groups in Sudan that had long been sidelined by a 2021 coup boldly signed an initial deal with the military to ignite a new 2-year political transition and appoint a fresh civilian government. However, on April 5, 2023, the final signing of the deal was delayed for a second time due to contentious disputes over the army's subordination to civilian oversight in the new administration, as well as the integration of the RSF into the armed forces. This volatile environment has strained the relationship between de facto President Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy, RSF military leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, ultimately igniting a fierce conflict as RSF personnel were deployed into various roles across Sudan. Both sides boldly accused each other of instigating the conflict in 2023 and have shown little willingness to engage in negotiations. Calls for surrender have been boldly echoed by both parties, further complicating the already tense situation. The region remains of paramount geopolitical importance, and among Western allies, growing concern is palpable about the potential establishment of a Russian base on the east coast of the Red Sea. Some military leaders have shown receptiveness to this idea, raising further concerns. There have also been reports of African individuals fighting alongside the Wagner Group in Ukraine, revealing the group's connections to multiple African governments and its operations in at least 8 African nations. Reuters has traced the stories of 3 African men who traveled to Russia with hopes of advancement but found themselves embroiled in the battlefields of Ukraine, fighting for Wagner. These individuals were among the tens of thousands of Russian convicts who chose to serve in Ukraine in exchange for a pardon. Despite internal unrest within the Wagner Group and Russia, the approximately 6,000 Wagner Group forces stationed in Africa have continued their operations with minimal changes, except for rumors of movement in Libya. The group's presence in Africa has been seen as a valuable instrument of Russian foreign policy, allowing it to gain significant influence at relatively low costs. The close relationship between Wagner and the Russian state has made it difficult to unravel their activities in Africa, raising concerns about the group's impact on the continent. This has far-reaching implications for global security, as evidenced by the UK's designation of Wagner as a terrorist organisation under the Terrorism Act 2000. This decision underscores the gravity of Wagner's actions, particularly in Ukraine, and highlights the potential threat the group poses to global security. Wagner's involvement in conflicts and its ties to autocratic rulers in countries like Mali, the Central African Republic, and Sudan have raised concerns about its impact on global stability and security. The multifaceted operations of the group in Africa, including covert military activities, mining ventures, and arms procurement, reflect a complex interplay of geopolitical ambitions, economic interests, and power struggles, all of which shape Russia's global standing and internal politics. Wagner's profit-oriented activities have aligned with Russia's foreign policy objectives, enabling the group to expand its influence in West and Central Africa by filling security voids and capitalizing on anti-French sentiment rooted in anti-colonialism and criticism of France's historical support for dictatorial regimes. The Wagner Group's presence on the African continent is seen as a destabilizing force for any country that allows for the deployment of the group's resources into their sovereign territory. The US Treasury Department has accused Wagner of committing widespread human rights abuses and appropriating natural resources. The statement also accused Wagner of supplying Sudan's rapid support forces with missiles for its conflict with the Sudanese army. The Wagner Group was founded by Dmitry Utkin, a former lieutenant colonel in the Russian military intelligence agency. In 2021, United Nations experts mentioned systemic and grave human rights and international humanitarian law violations, including arbitrary detention, torture, disappearances, and summary execution, committed by personnel of the Wagner Group in the Central African Republic. The most recent altercation in Sudan between Wagner and Ukraine, revealed in the available footage, is believed to reveal classified operations conducted by specialized units within Ukraine's Ministry of Defense's main intelligence directorate. These operations exemplify Ukraine's unwavering commitment to combating threats and maintaining a regional stability, despite the ongoing border conflict, thus taking advantage of a recent rebellion which may present a weakness in Russian operations. On June 23, 2023, the Wagner Group, a Russian government-funded paramilitary and private military company, staged a rebellion following escalating tensions between the Russian Ministry of Defense and Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. The nation was shocked by this mutiny, which left both Russians and the Kremlin at odds. The rebellion emerged in response to the Ministry of Defense's decision to integrate Wagner forces into the regular military by requiring them to sign contracts before July 1st, thereby diminishing Prigozhin's influence. Refusing to sign the agreement, Prigozhin accused the Ministry of Defense of incompetence. The rebellion prompted a criminal case against Prigozhin for inciting armed mutiny against the state, advancing to within less than 125 miles from Moscow before retreating. The Wagner Group's actions sent shockwaves throughout the nation. The mutiny, premeditated and kept secret from many Wagner members, raised questions regarding the stability of Vladimir Putin's regime and concerns about the group's future as an independent fighting force in Ukraine and other conflict zones. Western commentators have interpreted the recent attempted mutiny within the Wagner Group as evidence of the weakened and ineffective state of Russia. While the mutiny was relatively bloodless, it posed serious doubts about the stability of Putin's regime and the effectiveness of the state's response. The internal unrest within Russia carries implications for the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. It's apparent in recent footage of Prigozhin prior to his alleged death that he felt that the forces engaged with Ukraine in the disputed territory are unequipped and sent to death. His rebellion came after a call for more support for his soldiers, as well as a denial of sending Wagner forces to the front lines to die. This further reflects the bloodiness of the current war, which is ongoing, but also exemplifies why Russia has allowed the growth of Wagner to begin with. Reports on current losses in the Ukraine-Russian war vary among different sources. According to a report from Minas Rus, the approximate assessment of the armed forces of Ukraine as of November 15, 2023, indicates total personnel losses of around 320,670, with approximately 850 wounded. The same report suggests that Russia's losses as of November 15, 2023 amount to approximately 314,290 personnel. These figures are subject to change as the conflict continues. Another source, The Loop, ECPR, estimates that Russian losses have surpassed Ukrainian losses, with projected figures of 76,687 for Russia and 17,222 for Ukraine as of February 23, 2023. However, obtaining precise loss numbers is notoriously difficult, and the fog of war and biases in reporting sources can impact the accuracy of these estimates. In a recent report by Newsweek, Ukraine claimed that Russia has lost 3,700 more troops than the 13,700 soldiers reported by Moscow as lost by Kyiv in November 2023. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Russia has lost a total of 319,820 troops since the war began on February 24, 2022, including 17,400 Russian soldiers allegedly killed in November 2023. These figures reflect the significant toll that the conflict has taken on both sides. Overall, it's evident that the conflict has inflicted heavy losses on both Ukraine and Russia. This is why, over the past 2 to 3 years, the group has pursued an operational strategy of expanding its military and economic presence in Africa. Wagner's operational strategy over the past 2 to 3 years has been to expand both its military and economic footprint in Africa, with a network of associated companies pursuing commercial activities in the countries in which the mercenary group operates. The group has been involved in training, protection of officials, and mining operations in Sudan, and its interest in Mali may be linked to the country's rich gold reserves. Wagner has been incredibly useful for the Russian state in Africa, especially as it seeks diplomatic support amid the Ukraine conflict. The Wagner Group has become a very useful tool of Russian foreign policy in Africa, gaining significant influence with limited costs. The group has continued its operations in Africa despite the turbulence faced by its comrades in Russia, and it's been involved in atrocities and human rights abuses in countries such as Libya and Mali. Wagner's presence and activities in Africa have raised concerns about the group's impact on the continent and its relationship with the Russian government. The internal turmoil within the Wagner Group and its potential impact on Russia's military and political strategies present opportunities for Ukraine to exploit the unrest within Russia. The recent discussions within the Russian information space regarding operational changes in response to challenges in Ukraine suggest a possible shift in Russia's approach to the conflict, which Ukraine could seek to leverage. The internal challenges faced by the Russian state provide Ukraine with an opportunity to capitalize on the situation and potentially gain an advantage in the ongoing conflict. The Ukrainian military and partisans actively encourage pursuing the conflict, with military intelligence carrying out targeted assassinations of prominent officials from the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic, LNR, accused of committing war crimes in occupied Ukraine. Ukrainian mill bloggers expressed their commitment to a protracted war against Russia and emphasized the necessity for Russia to mobilize its military capabilities and economy for a sustained effort in Ukraine. Discussions within the Russian information space about operational changes to overcome challenges in Ukraine indicate a potential shift in Russia's approach to the conflict. Reflecting on this dedication, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky remarked in June during a brief coup attempt against the seemingly unassailable Kremlin, "Russia's weakness is evident, a complete and growing weakness. The longer Russia keeps its troops and mercenaries on our land, the more chaos, pain, and problems it will face later. It's obvious." This statement highlights the ongoing efforts to counteract the influence of various Russian power entities, including a private military group taking advantage of internal strife. The Wagner Group's activities in Africa raise concerns about its impact on the continent and its relationship with the Russian government. Despite the internal unrest, the group continues its operations in Africa to this day, drawing international attention and holding implications for the conflict in Ukraine. The presence of African individuals fighting for the Wagner Group in Ukraine underscores the group's global reach and complex ties to various regions, including Africa. The reported involvement of African individuals fighting for the Wagner Group in Ukraine highlights the group's global reach and engagement with diverse backgrounds. Concerns are raised about the group's impact on Africa and its relationship with the Russian government. In response, the United States has begun sharing more information about Wagner activity in Africa in order to combat their efforts. One US official quipped about the action by Biden's administration, "The best way to fight Wagner is with truth." But what do you think? Will the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the Wagner Group's operations in Africa have implications for regional and global security? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.